Hi everyone, this is Doug Craigbaum, and here are some God thoughts. As most of you have probably heard, New York has become the most recent state to legalize same-sex marriages. Gay rights activists are incredibly happy, while most conservatives and Christians are incredibly outraged. You can go on almost any website and see the debate raging. What is the issue, and why are people so upset? Well, most would say it's because God created the institution of marriage between a man and a woman in the beginning in the Garden of Eden. And the Bible says clearly that marriage is to be held in very high honor, and we should not tamper with it. Most Christians would be upset because it hits upon something called the sanctity of marriage. In other words, the special place marriage has in God's eyes. But can I say something to you that may be a little shocking? Most of these same Christians and conservatives that are so upset about the sanctity of marriage and the gay rights marriage debate have a greater problem that really causes them to be, what I would think, very hypocritical. What do I mean by that? Well, back in the early 60s, there was something else that came into the picture that has much more of a damaging effect on the sanctity of marriage. And it has had over the last 50 years. What is it? Well, it's what culture has come to terms as no-fault divorces. These same Christians that are so upset with same-sex marriages hardly think anything about no-fault divorces anymore. It's been my observation that when church leaders and Christians hear of a Christian couple that says, you know what, I've had enough, we just don't want to be married anymore, and head for divorce courts, most hardly say or think a thing about it. Something's not right about this. I've talked to church leaders, and when people approach them or they find out about people in their congregation who are getting ready to get divorced, especially the ones that there's no biblical ground for. There's no adultery. There's no abuse. There's no abandonment. They just simply don't want to be married anymore. When couples start heading for divorce court, many of the leaders I see become like a character I used to watch in the TV show Hogan's Heroes. Do you remember Sergeant Schultz? He's the one that would stick his hand in his ears and say, I see nothing, I hear nothing. Many Christian leaders are like Sergeant Schultz. They just bury their head in the sand when couples decide they want a divorce. Now, I'm going to tell you something. The gay rights people have every right to look at Christians and conservatives who think divorce is no big deal and say, hey, you're a bunch of hypocrites. I know this. My Bible says very clearly that God hates divorce. And that Jesus himself, when confronted with the issue, said it was never God's will for divorce. So before we start throwing stones and getting outraged with the same-sex marriage proponents, maybe the church ought to look at our own house. And when people just divorce on a whim, just because they're not happy or they want to try something different, maybe we're the ones that are destroying the sanctity of marriage, not just the gay rights activists. This is Doug Craigbaum, and these are God Thoughts.